We're 4 years into the current generation of consoles, and right now we're finally seeing developers hit their stride with a steady release of games. It seems that the power of most consoles has been maxed out, and the focus is now finally put more than ever on what really matters, the games. If you'd ask most gamers, I think they'll tell you 2017 has been a fantastic year for gaming. If you'd ask me, I'd say there's definitely been a great quantity of games with something for everyone. However, I also gotta be honest, on a personal level, there wasn't a lot that really jumped out. While I bought my own Nintendo Switch this year, the two heavy hitters, Mario and Zelda, were both enjoyable but didn't speak as much to me as they did to others. We've all seen the rise of Ubisoft-like open world games, but this year in particular was the one where I really felt burned out more than ever on this same old formula. I beat Horizon Zero Dawn and had a great time with it, but I felt there was a lot more to be desired in its story, characters and originality in gameplay. It was only a few years ago that I was still praising Assassin's Creed 4 and gave Shadow of Mordor my Game of the Year for 2014. But this year, I honestly haven't even felt bothered yet to continue playing both AC Origins and Shadow of War after my first few hours. I don't know what it is, but this year just didn't particularly seem to offer many games that grabbed me and didn't let go. Game of the Year is nothing more than a matter of opinion. Which game was the best to you this year? It's no competition, and unlike what most gamers online who fight about it seem to think, it really doesn't matter who gets most of the awards and who doesn't. Game of the Year is a personal pick, and the only one that should matter to you is your own. For me, I've always based that pick on a couple of factors. The quality of the game, the enjoyment I got out of it, and possibly an element of surprise, meaning that it outdid my expectations or that I hadn't seen it coming. 2017 was simply a very hard year for me to choose a Game of the Year. Where in previous years, one game would always easily jump out, this year I did find some great experiences, but there was simply no easy pick for me. In the end, I did manage to form a list of games, and I ultimately settled down on 4 total games that I would ultimately have to choose between. That proved to be no easy task at all. There's something to be said for all of them, and so I'd love to explain to you why. With that said, these are, in no particular order, the 4 games that qualified for my Game of the Year 2017. Pure fun. That's how I would describe Crash Bandicoot the N-Sane Trilogy. It may be a bit of an odd pick, technically these are PlayStation 1 games after all, but not only had I never fully played this series, the great thing about this package is that it doesn't feel like a remaster at all. The games look incredible, even for today's standards, and were an awesome throwback to the classic platforming genre that I grew up with and still love to this day. I've been saying it for years, we need more platformers, and Crash Bandicoot only strengthened that thought for me. Critics may have found the game too hard, some even ridiculously calling it the Dark Souls of the platforming genre, but it was this same difficulty that offered me a great challenge, which I'm always up for. Within a week, I managed to obtain the Platinum Trophy for each game in the collection, completing all the speedruns, destroying every single box. I was simply hooked. Now the game certainly wasn't without its flaws. The steady camera angle that couldn't be moved resulted in quite some frustrating deaths, as it wasn't always very clear to see where you would land after a long jump. I also felt that while playing through all the games in order, they sadly started featuring more and more gimmicky levels like motorcycle races, anti-gravity sections, shooting down blimps with your plane, that all kind of took away from the core gameplay, great platforming. It's actually the reason why I hold the unpopular opinion that the very first Crash Bandicoot was my favorite. It had my favorite settings, the best soundtrack, hardest levels, and simply stuck to its core. Regardless of any of these flaws, Crash Bandicoot the N-Sane Trilogy would have made sure I didn't have to go through the most dry summer in games that I felt in a long time, if it wasn't for the fact that I was so damn addicted that I completely destroyed these games in the span of just about a week. It's an amazing collection of games. Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is obviously the safe pick. As I consider the Uncharted series to be my favorite of all time, it was awesome to see this promised DLC to Uncharted 4 be something else than just more Uncharted. The Lost Legacy was made in just a single year, yet turned out to feel like its very own game, featuring a campaign close to the length of the very first game in the franchise. Chloe proved to be a great replacement for Nathan Drake, and it was definitely awesome to see an Uncharted game through another character for a change, one that also deserved their own adventure after memorable appearances in the series before. Uncharted 4 was an amazing send-off for Nathan Drake, but had a few issues that could sometimes drag the experience down a little, like the slow pacing in certain chapters. Naughty Dog seemed to have noticed these things as well, and the result was that the Lost Legacy just felt a lot more focused. With one main location being the star of the adventure, the game's pacing was totally on point. Most of the time, it struck a great balance between exploration, climbing, gunfights, set pieces and cutscenes, never making it feel too repetitive at any point. It was awesome to see a side story like this actually offering some of the best environments, puzzles and gameplay encounters that the franchise has seen, with especially the final chapter being one I don't think I'll forget anytime soon. The few things that brought it down mainly came down to the story aspect of the game for me. I personally preferred Nadine in the villain role that she had in Uncharted 4, rather than becoming the character I was also supposed to root for in this entry. Asav as a villain didn't get enough screen time, which was a shame considering it felt like he did have more potential, and some of his motives could have been explained somewhat better. Without giving anything away to people who haven't played the game yet, another surprise story aspect of the game felt a bit too forced to me, and seemed to go against what had already been established earlier. On the gameplay side of things, the open world chapter in the game was easily the least enjoyable part, and proved that a linear game like Uncharted certainly does not need to look at the current gaming trends and feel forced to be influenced by them. Last of all, there were no changes to the core gameplay systems. The combat, grappling hook and car driving all felt very similar. But this of course can all be forgiven, as the game started out as DLC and was made in such a short time after all. In the end, I still thoroughly enjoyed my time with Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. It's a game that I've beaten 5 times by now, and while linear campaigns are sadly not made as much as they used to, there is nothing more that shows how much I desire adventures like these. I can only hope that this isn't the last of Uncharted for Naughty Dog, but if that is the case, with both Uncharted 4 as the conclusion to Nathan Drake's story and The Lost Legacy as an extra expansion for the fans, one thing is for sure. Naughty Dog and their Uncharted franchise have gone out with a bang.
We play by my rules.
This year I finally decided to go for it and buy an Xbox One S. How else could I with it being offered at such a dirt cheap price? Turned out it wasn't exactly the best year to jump in, however, as the exclusive lineup was shallow to say the least. Fortunately, Cuphead made up for that the best it could, giving me a reason to keep turning on that Xbox One for quite a while. Obviously the reason why it managed to get people hyped for it ever since the announcement in 2014 was for the way it looked. Its 1930 cartoon art style jumped out from the very beginning, and the final game looks nothing short of incredible. From the character designs to the level art, sound effects and that surprise element every time a boss transitions to its next phase, the presentation is simply top notch. That being said, my biggest fear about the game had always been whether the graphics would be used to make up for the fact that the gameplay wasn't as great, and this is exactly where I'm so glad it managed to surprise. Looking back at the game now, the reason why I loved Cuphead so much wasn't for the way it looked, it was for the way it played and the challenge that it offered. Every boss encounter is difficult, dying is never a rare occasion. The game is unforgivable, not letting you pass levels by beating them on the easy difficulty mode, but simply having it be there for practice. The game doesn't shy away from wanting players to actually get better at it, and the result is that I played levels over and over and over, until I finally managed to get a hang of the patterns and beat levels that I sometimes had almost felt like giving up on. This is rare, especially now that games are all about being time-consuming rather than difficult, and companies wanting you to throw money at them rather than actually get better in order to progress. It's something that I can only respect. The only downside I could honestly mention is maybe that the game is not groundbreaking in any way. It's a fairly standard 2D experience that has you jump and shoot along the way. But with responsive controls and great design, I had a blast playing it. I beat Cuphead in only 3 days with 15 hours on the clock, feeling like I just had to keep going the entire time and see it through. Combined with the fact that the game was made by just a small group of people and offered at a very low price, Cuphead was simply a fantastic game. Last but not least, if there's one game that came out of nowhere for me, it's Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. While the game had been announced all the way back in 2014 and saw many development updates, I have to admit I just never really looked into it too much. And honestly, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because it made the game so much more special. Hellblade was a true experience, a 7-hour game that takes you on Senua's personal journey, that has you feel the way she does and in very clever ways. Hearing voices speaking to you through your headset, from left to right, back and forth, was a fantastic way of making you experience the feeling of suffering from psychosis, something that Senua, as the main character, is so affected by. High production values meant that the game not only looked absolutely stunning, with facial details, sound effects and beautiful sceneries making a big impact, the game also played super smooth. With a simple control setup, clever puzzles and satisfying combat, Ninja Theory made sure that it created a super polished game, offered at half the price for half the length of the average AAA production. That's not to say that Hellblade was a perfect game though. My biggest complaint did come down to the gameplay, which could feel somewhat basic no matter how well it played. The first half is a little too much like you're progressing from room to room. You have a puzzle section, followed by a fight, followed by a piece of the story in that exact same order again and again. And while the combat works well, having just 5 moves at your disposal without any upgrades or additional unlocks as you get further into the game simply makes it feel the same from beginning to end. But at the end of the day, what made Hellblade leave such a huge impact was the story that it told. Taking you across many different settings, slowly having you unfold what exactly it is that Senua had to go through in her past, it was an experience that could go from interesting to depressing to sometimes downright scary, while never making you lose the feeling of wanting to keep going and see how it would all come to an end. It's something only few games nowadays can do, but Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice was one of them.
Senua, prepare yourself for Ragnarok.
And as I listed these 4 games, it ultimately came down to picking my overall game of the year, a task that honestly seemed to be impossible for me. There is really something to be said for each one, but at the same time, none of these games were absolutely flawless or jumped out more than another either. It felt almost unfair having to pick just one of them. They all offered great enjoyment to me, and all in their own way. For a long time, I struggled to think what the right choice would be to make. But then I thought back about 2017, asking myself what year it really was for gaming, and suddenly I realized something. 2017 might have been a great year for games, there was something for everyone after all. However, you could also say it was actually a terrible year for the gamers. Pre-order bonuses and DLC plans from the jump became the standard. Games like Mass Effect Andromeda took a nosedive in quality, while others like Destiny 2 didn't even attempt of being anything more but a copy and paste job, existing to milk us all dry. And speaking about that, last but not least, we saw the rise of microtransactions, games with loot boxes that, whether it was a single player campaign like Shadow of War or a multiplayer like Battlefront and For Honor, took no issue at all in making sure you were constantly reminded to spend extra money for advantages with every opportunity they got. And while being reminded of that, I looked back at the list of games that I had, realizing that this entire package made a far greater statement than any individual game and its quality could do. All 4 of these games are products that respect gamers, that put their own vision and ideas over whatever the biggest trends are. These are games not afraid to have a finite length, that don't feel like they need to overstay their welcome. And not only do none of them contain any annoying business practices like microtransactions, they all launched at a reduced price point as well. This is where the gaming industry should be heading. These are the games that gamers should want to support. They aren't just amazing experiences that I got a lot of enjoyment out of this year, I view them as examples that so many other gaming companies these days can look at and learn a thing or two from. All 4 of these games, Crash Bandicoot the N-Sane Trilogy, Uncharted The Lost Legacy, Cuphead and Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, are my games of the year for 2017. Thanks a lot everybody for watching a new video in my in-depth gaming series. I really hope you enjoyed it. Next Sunday I'll have another episode up with my thoughts on a gaming topic that interests me, so make sure you subscribe if you had not done so already. As always, please understand that videos like these take a very long time to make, so I hope you can show your support by leaving a like, sharing the video online or with your friends to help get it noticed, or by becoming a Patreon supporter, like all the people in the credits shown on screen. At whatever amount you feel like, your donations make these videos possible and give you access to cool rewards like monthly Q&A videos, podcast episodes and early access if you can't wait to see what's next. If you would like to help me out, then please head over to patreon.com/RobinGaming. I'd really appreciate it. And then with that being said, I hope to see you again next time.